think we're good.
Let me record on this just so I could see the difference there. Okay, so that's good. And this is good. And so, hey, folks, Jeff Salzman here with Ankur the Light. Hey, Ankur.
Hey, Jeff. Good morning.
How are you?
I'm fantastic. And
yeah, you said you were activated.
I am activated. I'm feeling really active and excited.
Good.
So are you ready? Should we just jump
I'm
in?
ready. Yeah, let me just get a clean sheet of paper.
All right. Yeah, good. Because you're gonna need it. All
right. Cool.
So I was just talking to a friend, and I looked far and wide through the news this week into the most obscure topics. And I found something that your readers have probably not heard about, which is that the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, was voted out. But there's so there's three things I want that are really up for me about this, and I just talked to a friend about it, and we had this great discussion. So one is really, and the talk I had with my friend right before this was a coaching call about, like, he's got all these opportunities, kind of what should he do next, and the general framework that I have is that if you come into something and you're like, oh, what can I do in this opportunity, you will end up satisfying that opportunity and maybe the needs of the person that's presenting you that opportunity. But it may not, and most likely will not, be satisfying you. And the way to make the right choice about the next job or whatever we do is to have a sense, like a very clear, specific sense on what we want and what is good for us. And that's dictated by our values and our sense of integrity and our sense of self-knowledge at what will make us happy and what will make us feel in different ways.
Yep.
And so when I see what happened here, it seems like this dude, Kevin McCarthy, did the exact opposite of that. And he took his soul, his like divine soul that somebody gave him, and he took out these like really pair of sharp scissors, and he just cut it up into all these little cubes, or squares rather, in 2D, and then gave it to all these different people with all these different promises. I was like, oh, I'm going to do this for you over here. Oh, I really believe this over here. Oh, no, you people are going to keep you people happy over here. And this is like, it's like this metaphor, this parable of what happens when you do that. And you just don't pay attention to your own integrity.
Yeah.
Right. So that's one thought.
Yep.
The second thought I had, I guess it's more of a basic level question, but also, like, what does it say about where we're at spiritually regarding cooperation as a system of 300 million people? It's like, why did all the Democrats vote against this dude? Like, why do we just want more chaos? Like, clearly the far edge of the Republican Party is pretty interested in chaos. They're not that interested in government. Fine, that's their thing. That's cool. Everyone's got their own thing. Some people like that. It's great. But why is, like, the whole corporate center, whatever, of the country also, like, into that? And then the third thing is, like, all right, what does this say? And this to me is like the longer term developmental question. We have these ancient institutions, ancient for us in the New World, sorry, not 3,000 years ancient like in Rome, or 8,000 years like in Phoenicia, but we've got these 200-year-old institutions with they're built for, like, old, white, rich, slave-owning men. And, maybe some people are still like that in there, but there's also some other people in there, and we want the rules and the culture to change. We haven't really effectively changed it from like a progressive point of view, but then we've had this whole generation, I think mainly on the right, though maybe a little bit on the left, of, like, we're just going to say fuck you to all the cultural norms, and we're not going to abide by the spirit of these laws or even the letter of them, and we're just going to, like, barge into things and destroy things and not care about procedure and respect. And this is like, is this what we get when we repeatedly say no to the invitation of intentional cultural transformation? We get like unintentional and just, like, kind of like, oh, and nobody cares about anybody, and it's just burn the whole thing down, which will, from a daily evolver point of view, probably, I mean, it must lead eventually to some positive change in the culture of the House and Senate, but through this like pretty unpleasant, bumpy experience that's inefficient in terms of governing and makes us look like democratic amateur.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's what I got. That is what is active and alive in me in this moment.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, well, certainly the autocrats of the world point to this sort of thing and say, really, you want democracy? So, well, all I can do, I think, is tell us, a bit of a different story in terms of how this fits in a bigger evolutionary world. And first of all, when you talk about intentional cultural transformation, the problem with that is that there are 2 or 3 big worldviews online that have different intentions, and they're and we're fighting it out, as we have for all of human history. All of human history, the one group's fighting another group, and for most of human history, it was very bloody. And when one side won, it wasn't like they were necessarily trying to build a peace. They were just trying to triumph, and they knew that they were going to get fought again, and then they would dominate. And so at some point in that, and this is the developmental move of modernity, there was a decision to let's have a bigger view of politics where we allow everybody to think what they want. They could be religious, they could be not religious, they could think this, they could think that. We have a private sphere for the first time in human history where you could do all kinds of things that you could never do in any point in human history. So we want to celebrate that and not expect that to be, necessarily the road to it's a piece of the road to utopia, but it's not utopia yet. So then what we have is, we have this system put in place by white slave owners, but if we look at every stage in the development of democracy, first it was just the aristocrats kind of trying to keep the handcuffs on the king. That was the best they could do with the Magna Carta. And then actually they fell back from that, and then they came forward again. And there's been democracy, sort of fluorescing here and there in Greece and so forth in history, but it never held. And after the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, it held in the United States. And it's not pretty. It's never been pretty. Boy, we had a civil war that killed 2% of the adult population. Ankur. That would be the equivalent of 30 million people if that war was fought today with our population. Can you imagine such a thing? The devastation. So, part of what we have to do, I think, in integral and just developmentally is, yes, the situation that you described is a fucking clusterfuck. All I can say is it's less of a clusterfuck in a certain way. It's a more benign, humane clusterfuck in a certain kind of way than at any point in human history. We can look at the sort of medium term in 10, 15 years. Maybe it was better in the 90s. There was a certain argument for that. But we're in we have, well, anyway, let me just stop there and see how any of that lands.
Yeah, I think that's true. Of course, that's the context we're in.
Yeah.
But like specifically, like think that my third point or my third line of investigation, the cultural change in the institutions of governance. Like, they have all these antiquated rules. I'm sure there's like this super old school dress code for everybody, men and women. Like all these things to me they're just like little indications, little symptoms that like, oh, this, and in general, our democracy, and I think in every, France is quite different. That they have this like new constitution and this new republic every 50 years, it seems like,
Right.
or less. And it seems like we could use a little bit of that,
Yeah.
like a little bit of like some V2-ness going on here.
Yeah.
And I
V2
guess
being what?
of just like another, just like reimagining how we do
Oh,
democracy.
version 2. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Um, but I guess my question to you is, rather than getting it intentionally, it seems like we're getting it unintentionally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's evolution. It's not about us intending. It's about us growing, and that's always dicey. And there's new territory, and there's a lot of destruction, and there's tragedy. You know,
But maybe this is a question about, this will help my understanding of developmental theory. But I feel like we could have gotten there intentionally. Like there were invitations,
okay,
that we did not take. And maybe the Civil War is a good example. It's like,
Yep.
It happened. It was brutal, and it needed to happen in terms of like we had to go from the consciousness before it to the consciousness and the way of organizing afterwards.
Yep.
But it wasn't the only pathway there.
Right.
Like, were there not other opportunities that we did not take at the time because of our lack of awareness or consciousness or whatever, ego? Right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I would say that because of the Civil War, people all over the world learned lessons, but the people here definitely learned lessons. And it's not like that, we had Reconstruction, which was another clusterfuck. And then we had Jim Crow. And, it's not like any of that, was solved. But we look at that history and see we could do better. And so we don't have Jim Crow anymore. We don't have this. We don't have, there's lots of ways in which, the culture is moving forward at a breakneck speed, Ankur, I think. And I think that part of what's going on in this next year, hold on to your hat, because this is going to be the frontal assault on the institution of government that we have right now. And of course, that's going to change at some point. You think we're going to keep it the way it is right now forever? No, nothing stays forever. But there's going to be, there's right now with Trump particularly, and the Republicans that went against McCarthy, they basically, you could say they're just chaos. They don't want any government. They're just trying to destroy. They are in a way, but they're destroying what they see as a monster. So, you have to take it from their perspective. And there's a lot of people in this country who do. They see the government as oppressive. They just naturally do. And I would say, interestingly enough, developmentally, these are people who are at what we call blue or amber traditionalists, God and country. They're literally closer developmentally to the king's men coming and taking their daughters and sons, that kind of thing. So they're very allergic to anything like government power. They feel they're the first generation developmentally to say, I have the power. I am the sovereign. And so any growth of government, and there's been tremendous growth of government in the last 50 years. I would say developmentally, that's the modern government comes online, where there's the courts and the laws, and then there's the postmodern government that comes online, where there's welfare and safety net and so forth, and more of a sort of an egalitarian impulse, certainly not egalitarianism, but that sort of thing. So that's coming online, and none of it's pretty. You could criticize every step of the way. That's the funny thing, and we want to be intentional. Absolutely, especially anybody who stops and thinks. I want to be intentional. I don't know what I can do beyond, changing the noosphere, voting appropriately, doing these podcasts, talking to you. But it's going to unfold, and it's going to be one fucking hell of a ride here. We have Trump, being prosecuted in the courts, and and he's going to run for president at the same time. And I mean, the best I can say is that at least it's happening, online, and in terms of you talk about the noosphere, it's happening in terms of ideology and ideas, and it's not going to be bloody, I hope. I mean, there will be some bloody, there'll be some blood around the edges, I think. There has been, January 6th.
There has been. Yeah. I guess, I love bringing it back to gratitude.
Yeah.
And one thing that I love about talking with you is it really helps me see the role that everybody plays. Everybody's playing a role.
Yeah.
It's like that classic. I always go back to Thich Nhat Hanh and the cup of tea, and being able to see the entire like hydrological system of the planet in your cup of tea, and to understand how the sun participated in growing those leaves and then dried and fermented. And it's all these people. I looked at, I hadn't seen a picture of Matt Gantz before, and look at this guy with the pompadour, and really, I mean, gotta say, nice blue suit. He was like, that's a nice suit. I like, oh, that guy, he's participating in my life right now.
Yes.
And the gratitude I have is that these institutions really do need to evolve, and they really need to change. I've been part of like liquid democracy movements, and online voting. There's all these different ways that people are coming at it, and most of them I think are terrible and not, they're well-intentioned, but like not going to be great. And the same with what these dudes are doing, but what they're pointing out is like, whether or not the embedded power structure culturally is ready for them to change, they're going to change.
Yeah.
And so they might as well. And I think most people who are in general opposed to change, because change is, it's a big deal. And I would now, as a middle-aged dude with kids, I'm kind of in that camp of like, can I just focus on what I'm focusing on and not have to deal with a lot of other stuff going on? But you got to really push it. You got to really push it to get those people to pay attention and be like, all right, finally, let's do this intentionally. And this is enough anarchy and disrespect and chaos and just burn it down energy that hopefully it's going to lead to, okay, let's evolve this consciously.
Yes.
That we may not have, that I've been pushing for a while, but no one's like listening. They're listening now, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And that's the nature of evolution, is it's red in tooth and claw. It's one of the old biologists said. It does come forward by people struggling and fighting, also friending, also getting into each other's heads. We just can't stay out of each other's hair. That's the real problem, Ankur. It's just built into us. And then you have, you talk about this cup of tea and the understanding of the whole system. And in a way, that's what these professional politicians, they have their certain role. I mean, I'm horrified by them. I pity them in a way, but politics is the use of power. It's the study of power, how power works, how power is exercised. So they're in these roles where they have a lot of power, and they're titrating it, and they're working with other human beings, and they're manipulating, and they're spinning, and they're strategizing, and they're bullying, and they're going out into front of the cameras and getting their mug shots, and their egos are out of, I mean, welcome to the professional politician. But at this stage of development, they have a role. I mean, they get in there, and it's not like the culture is stuck. The culture's moving at radical speed in terms of all kinds of race and a lot of the interior stuff, race and gender and all of that sort of thing, and also the egalitarian impulse. Trump comes in and blows a lot of the conservative orthodoxy away in terms of not spending and Social Security and privatizing and all that stuff. He's like, no. And he's like, and let's not screw around in other people's wars. Now, I can take the opposite perspective and do often. I'm pretty much in favor of Biden's policies, I guess. I don't know. That's the other thing, Ankur, is that I do think that a feature of integral thinking is a healthy sense of, accommodating multiple perspectives and not knowing which one's right necessarily.
Being able to see the different ways in which they contribute, the problems they
Yes.
might have, how they interrelate.
Yes. Yes.
But
And when you
ultimately, we
hold
don't have
them, there's a
enough.
natural wisdom that is able to arise because you have more to work with when it's called, when it's called on. Something like that. But yeah, see what else you talked about here.
The second point was why the Democrats are into this. Like, is there any, like, besides their own personal benefit and this and that, and their reputation versus
Let's stop there. I mean, they want that's the
but like, as statespeople, we like elected these people to be for us, not for them.
I know. Isn't that funny? And from the perspective of Washington, D.C., and by that I mean the representatives, the people who work at the agencies, it is all working just fine. There's no problem. This is what they're there to do. They're making money. Dianne Feinstein, she becomes a senator. She dies a multimillionaire. They all do. There's very few who aren't somehow rigging the system, getting money. This is coming more and more to light. I think that the Congress has a 19% approval rating, something like that. The people are getting hip to, and this is where I'm sympathetic to the people who want to go up against Washington, so to speak, and the deep state and the whole fucking machine, and yet I'm so grateful for the machine, because look around us, there's problems, but our ancestors would have considered this heaven. We're peaceful, we got a lot to eat, we can raise a kid, that kind of stuff. So I don't know, I'm rambling, but it's not pretty.
You come back to that a lot.
I do think that the tragic aspect of life, that it's unsatisfactory, dukkha, suffering, that's true.
Yeah.
That we're from the Christian perspective, we're in a fallen world, a sinful world. There's something deeply true about that. And yet we can see that we're rising, it's like up from Eden. We haven't fallen from Eden. We're actually coming out of the, before we were self-conscious, we were merged with nature. And there's some memory of that kind of paradise that we measure everything subsequent against. It's the same to think about childhood. Think about when you're just being held by your mother, and everything's okay. And then you got to leave your mother's lap, and you have to go to school, and you have to get all fucked up, and you have to make all kinds of mistakes, and it's painful and you hate it. And, growth that's the nature of collective growth or cultural growth as well. And you never know, you're 8 and then all of a sudden you got to be 9 and 10 and 13. Fuck. I want to stay 8. I liked 8. But, you can't. So anyway, does that make any sense?
Yeah. I mean, were you just saying numbers and words, or was that true for you about being 8?
Well, no, I who doesn't like 8? I mean, certainly kids have sometimes bad times, but there's that innocence, and you haven't really left the home, mom and dad's embrace and all of that good stuff. It's healthy, and so we have that memory collectively of the innocence of when we were merged with nature, so to speak. And nothing else. So, that feels like we've fallen from paradise. We have, literally, by becoming self-conscious, by growing up. Yeah. And it's, again, not pretty, but there's beauty in it. And, we have awareness, and we have more awareness all the time. And I think we're growing so fast. It's just freaking us out right now. And I think it will continue to accelerate. And then we have artificial intelligence. And,
what's your kind of your personal feeling, aware of this narrative around like the interpretation of sin you gave, which I think is beautiful, or the dukkha, the basic unsatisfactoriness, unsatisfiability of
yes,
the world, or this
that unsatisfactoriness. It's a mouthful,
right? I mean,
but it gets to it.
It's fun. I mean, it's true. It's empirically true, right?
Yeah.
So, but what is your takeaway, like your kind of emotional takeaway on a day-to-day basis with that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's, I hate to even say this, but the first thing that comes to mind is heartbreak. I mean, how can you not be heartbroken if you look around at the suffering of other people and yourself, but other people. And then, that kicks off a spiritual path if you're lucky. And you learn how to deal with that basic nature of life by identifying with the bigger part of who you are, the part that's not limited by time and space, that is, divine, if you will, or connected to the divine, or subject, or whatever. There's different portals to that understanding. But then, as a Buddhist say, then you want to drop your preferences. Or maybe you can have preferences, but you don't want to get gripped around anything, and you flow with life, and that it's going to end in death. And to remind yourself that it ends in death, you go to the graveyard or the charnel grounds from time to time, and you sit there and look at the decomposing bodies. That's what they used to do, because that's next.
Oh, yeah, I've done that.
Up, man. I mean, I still think my new theory is that this is a punishment planet for a much nicer planet. That's
seriously?
I don't know. I'm just kidding. But, when you really wrap your head around the tragic nature of life, fuck, man, kids and animals and Jesus Christ. I mean, it's just brutal. And then you read history. It's like, again, I mean, reading history not so long ago, the state of life in various parts of the planet right now. And you just realize just basic food, clean water, safety, freedom, say and think what you want. This is a huge, amazing achievement of humanity. And it's precious. And yet you look, it's like the sausage. You look at how it's actually made and how it's actually functioned. It's like we're waist deep in bullshit the whole way. But we used to be chest deep, and I think that's, so I look, it's like the spiral of development. We go round and round. So there's that motion, but there's also a forward motion. And that's, and the spiral gets bigger because we're able to see more and relate to more and have compassion for more and bring more to the party in terms of, what we're aware of. And then there's a natural loving intelligence that is at work. That's the infinite part of us, the creative part that is behind the universe itself, I guess. But there is a loving wisdom there that helps these all the more pieces that you're able to be aware of fly in some formation to organize themselves when you need them, because you're able to hold these multiple perspectives. And so that's perspective taking is the calisthenics of development. When you become, like you're talking about, intentional development, Ankur. So that's very few people are, into it in the way that we're talking about. And but when you are, then perspective taking becomes a pleasure, and you actually get activated, like you said at the beginning of this call. You get activated in a good way. When somebody's like blowing your mind, and you think, how the fuck could they be doing this? Because there's the challenge. What are they doing? How's it working? What's going on for them? Where's this land in terms of the movement of history? Even the corruption. We talk about corruption. Corruption used to be the economy back in pre-modern times. It was like there was nothing but the corruption. It was like, you do this for me, I'll do this for you, and we'll exploit these people. And so that there's still some of that left is not a surprise. The question is there more or less? And different perspectives on that, actually. What's corrupt? Is the deep state corrupt? Is that suffocating us? This is Matt Gaetz. This is Trump even. Let's go back to the 50s when it was so much less government. Or is the corruption from the corporate tech, and so that's more the progressive view of things. And although progressives like tech, but the oil companies and all of that kind of stuff, we just have our natural antipathies. And green postmodern, they have it's like the blue traditionalists have a natural antibody to government. The progressives have a natural antibodies to the corporate state. And welcome to evolution. These two worldviews are fighting it out. And the integrated worldview is going to see, the problems of both, the opportunities of both, how, what can be the next phase shift in terms of government where there's more equality and more opportunity and more freedom and more security. That's a story of humanity. It's not going to stop unless the asteroid hits. And even then, we'll start back as little moles and mice, do it all again.
Or the dolphins.
Or the dolphins will take over.
Yeah. I got my money on the dolphins.
Yeah, we like the dolphins. All right. So
good job, Jeff.
I think we got it all figured out again. Thank God.
We did it.
All right. Well, then let's call it a quits for the day. Again, thank you, Ankur Delight of 10,000 Heroes podcast and of all your wonderful coaching and everything. People could check you out there, right?
That's right.
Heroes. Yeah. And you're
doing
a shop coming up.
Yeah. MomentumLab.com
in December.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, that workshop is on December 7th.
Okay.
And it's going to be, in a way, it's called the Night Vision Summit.
Mm-hmm.
So, like we're talking about the darkness and we're kind of talking about what could possibly go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it's really a message of hope. It's really, it's directly related to everything all of the vulnerability you just shared and all the pain. And it's like, that is all part of the night vision thing is like, let us acknowledge all of that. Let us open our eyes and see how that is all happening to everyone and to us and what part we're all playing with it. Yeah. And there's this space that's created by not being afraid of looking at it.
Yeah.
All of the kind of programs we're running on ourselves to keep ourselves sane while not looking at all that. And to just be able to face it and be like, okay, we can look at the shit. We can cry. We can acknowledge that it's fucked up. We can say that oh, this plan I have could be easily derailed by any one of 10 behaviors that I've been doing for 30 years. And then we can look at what are all the ways we can work with it individually and as a community.
Yes.
So it's really ultimately it's about hope, but bringing in all those orange rational analytical tools.
Yes.
that are, because you can't just have the hope of like, oh, it'd be so nice. We actually have to make that, like work is love in action, like that
Yes.
whole idea.
Oh my God. Well, so well put. And the energy that comes back after you've had your heart broken is, that's the move beyond the heartbreak, or it includes the heartbreak, actually includes and transcends.
Includes. Yes, that's what we want. Yeah.
Include and transcend.
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah,
That's what
Jeff.
I used to say. All right, man. Talk to you later.